Before we begin this journey through time, take a moment to settle in. Let your body relax and allow the day to slowly fade away. Tonight, you're listening to Dreaming, a place where history becomes quiet, where stories move gently, and where the past is told slowly enough to rest the mind. This is not a story of urgency or noise. It is a long, calm journey through moments that shaped a nation, told softly, so you can simply listen and drift. So breathe in, breathe out, and when you're ready, let this story begin. Long before the maps of Europe gave this land a name, the continent that would one day be called America was already alive with motion, memory, and meaning. Vast forests breathed with the rhythm of seasons. Rivers carved patient paths toward distant oceans, and civilizations flourished in harmony with the land. From the mound-building societies of the Mississippi Valley to the complex nations of the Southwest and the dense coastal communities of the Atlantic, indigenous peoples had shaped this world for thousands of years. Their stories were not written in ink, but carried through oral tradition, secret rituals, and an intimate understanding of nature. This was not an empty land waiting to be discovered. It was a living world. Across the Atlantic Ocean, Europe was changing. Kingdoms competed for power. Trade routes promised wealth, and curiosity about the unknown grew stronger with each passing generation. The idea of a new world began as a dream shaped by ambition and imagination. Sailors spoke of lands beyond the horizon, while monarchs envisioned empires stretching across unseen seas. When European ships finally reached the shores of the Americas in the late 15th century, the moment was framed as discovery. Yet, from another perspective, it was the beginning of a collision between worlds that neither side fully understood. The first encounters were cautious and complex. Indigenous communities observed the newcomers with a mix of curiosity and concern. The Europeans, unfamiliar with the land and its people, relied heavily on native knowledge to survive. Trade emerged. Corn, tobacco, and furs exchanged for metal tools and textiles. For a brief moment, cooperation seemed possible. Stories traveled both ways. Europeans described vast rivers and fertile lands, while indigenous peoples tried to interpret the intentions of these strangers who arrived on floating wooden structures with shimmering armor and unfamiliar beliefs. Hope followed these early meetings. For Europeans, the continent represented opportunity, a chance to escape rigid social systems, religious persecution, and economic hardship. To many, America symbolized rebirth, a place where history could begin again. For some indigenous nations, alliances with European powers offered strategic advantages against rival tribes. Yet beneath this fragile optimism, misunderstanding quietly grew. Language barriers, cultural differences, and contrasting views of land ownership created tensions that would soon erupt. As European settlements expanded, the balance shifted. Colonies became permanent, and survival turned into domination. Land, once shared and respected, was now claimed, fenced, and renamed. Diseases carried from Europe swept through indigenous populations, devastating communities that had no immunity. Entire societies were weakened before they could resist. What Europeans often described as progress came at an unimaginable cost to the original inhabitants of the land. Conflict became inevitable. Indigenous resistance took many forms: diplomacy, adaptation, and armed defense of ancestral territories. European powers, driven by competition and profit, responded with force. The New World was no longer just imagined, it was being reshaped through struggle. Each settlement, treaty, and battle left a mark on the land and its people. The dream of opportunity was now intertwined with loss, displacement, and survival. Yet even in this era of upheaval, cultural exchange continued. Foods, languages, and traditions blended in unexpected ways. Indigenous agricultural knowledge transformed European diets, while European technologies altered native ways of life. This exchange, though unequal, laid the foundations of a society that would grow increasingly complex. The continent was becoming something new, neither entirely indigenous nor European, but a tense fusion of both. By the early 16th century, the idea of America had evolved. It was no longer just a distant hope or a wild frontier. It was a place of contradiction, a land of promise and pain, creation and destruction. The seeds of a future nation were being planted in uncertain soil, shaped by courage and cruelty alike. What began as an imagined world had become a contested reality, one that would continue to define the American story for centuries to come. This was the beginning of a long journey, a journey born from dreams, driven by ambition, and shadowed by conflict. The New World was imagined as a fresh start, but history ensured it would carry the weight of every choice made upon its shores. And from those first encounters, the story of America truly began. As the 17th century unfolded, the imagined promise of the New World hardened into daily reality. Along the eastern coastline of North America, European colonies took root, fragile at first, then stubbornly permanent. Jamestown, Plymouth, and other settlements were born not from comfort, but from desperation. Survival demanded relentless labor, adaptation, and sacrifice. Harsh winters, unfamiliar landscapes, and limited supplies turned each day into a test of endurance. The dream of opportunity came with a price few had fully understood before arriving. Colonial life revolved around struggle. Fields had to be cleared, homes constructed, and food secured under constant threat of famine or disease. Communities depended on cooperation, yet divisions quickly emerged. Wealth and power accumulated unevenly, favoring landowners and merchants, while indentured servants and laborers worked under brutal conditions. The promise of freedom that had drawn many settlers across the Atlantic often stopped short of reality, replaced by rigid hierarchies imported from Europe. At the center of this contradiction stood slavery. As colonial economies expanded, especially in the southern colonies, the demand for labor intensified. African men, women, and children were forcibly transported across the Atlantic in one of history's most inhumane migrations. Shackled in chains, stripped of identity, and treated as property, enslaved people became the backbone of colonial agriculture. Their unpaid labor produced wealth that shaped the colony's growth, even as their humanity was denied. Slavery was not a side effect of colonial life, it was a foundation. Economic hardship affected nearly everyone, but it fell most heavily on those with the least power. Small farmers struggled against debt, taxes, and land scarcity. Urban workers faced unstable wages and rising costs. Meanwhile, colonial elites justified inequality through law, religion, and race. Freedom was preached loudly, yet selectively applied. The moral contradiction was impossible to ignore. A society speaking of liberty while building its prosperity on bondage. Resistance emerged wherever oppression took hold. Enslaved Africans resisted the rebellion, escape, sabotage, and the quiet preservation of culture and faith. Some fled north, others formed maroon communities in remote regions, carving out fragile spaces of autonomy. Indigenous resistance continued as well, as native nations fought to defend their lands against expanding settlements. Even among European colonists, unrest grew. Uprisings like Bacon's Rebellion exposed deep tensions between wealthy elites and struggling settlers, revealing that colonial unity was often an illusion. Religion played a complex role in colonial society. For some, faith offered comfort and moral guidance amid hardship. For others, it became a tool of control. Religious institutions often reinforced social order, yet they also inspired dissent. Movements emphasizing individual conscience and equality before God quietly challenged systems of absolute authority. These ideas, though limited in practice, planted early seeds of resistance that would later grow into revolutionary thought. Despite the suffering, colonial society continued to expand. Trade networks connected the colonies to Europe, Africa, and the Caribbean, binding them into a global economy. Tobacco, cotton, and sugar fueled wealth while deepening dependence on enslaved labor. Cities grew, ports thrived, and political institutions slowly developed. Yet beneath this growth lay unresolved tensions between freedom and control, prosperity and exploitation, hope and cruelty. By the early 18th century, the colonies had become places of deep contradiction. They offered opportunity to some, while denying humanity to others. Survival required moral compromise, and progress was measured in both success and suffering. The colonies were no longer merely extensions of Europe. They were evolving into something distinct, shaped by struggle, resistance, and unresolved injustice. This era left a lasting imprint on American identity. The ideals of liberty that would later define the nation were forged alongside chains that bound millions. The cost of survival was paid in human lives, broken families, and stolen futures. And within these contradictions, the foundations of a future reckoning were laid, one that would challenge the colonies to confront the truths they had long avoided. By the mid-18th century, the American colonies had matured into complex societies with distinct identities. What began as distant outposts of European power were now communities bound together by shared hardship, local traditions, and a growing sense of independence. The Atlantic Ocean that once connected the colonies to Britain increasingly felt like a barrier rather than a bridge. Decisions affecting colonial life were made thousands of miles away, often without colonial voices being heard. Slowly, resentment turned into reflection, and reflection into resistance. The roots of rebellion were not sudden. They grew quietly through laws, taxes, and expectations imposed by the British Crown. Measures such as the Stamp Act and the Townshend Acts placed financial burdens on colonists who had no representation in Parliament. The phrase "taxation without representation" became more than a slogan. It was a moral argument. For many colonists, the issue was not simply money, but dignity. They believed their labor and loyalty entitled them to a voice in their own governance. Ideas became weapons long before guns were raised. Pamphlets, newspapers, and public debates spread revolutionary thought across towns and villages. Writers and thinkers drew inspiration from Enlightenment philosophy, emphasizing natural rights, individual liberty, and the social contract between governments and the people they ruled. Thomas Paine's common sense transformed complex political theory into language ordinary citizens could understand. Rebellion, once unthinkable, was now framed as reasonable and even necessary. Tension turned to violence in 1770 with the Boston Massacre, an event that symbolized British oppression in colonial eyes. 3 years later, the Boston Tea Party openly defied imperial authority. These moments did not yet unify all colonists, but they hardened divisions. Some remained loyal to the crown, fearing chaos more than control. Others believed freedom was worth the risk of war. The colonies stood on the edge of irreversible change. In 1775, that change arrived. Armed conflict erupted at Lexington and Concord, marking the beginning of the American Revolutionary War. What followed was not just a military struggle, but a test of endurance and belief. The colonial forces, soon known as the Continental Army, were poorly equipped and inexperienced. Facing the world's most powerful empire, their survival depended on perseverance, strategy, and leadership. General George Washington emerged as a steady force, holding together an army defined as much by hope as by hardship. As the war continued, the idea of independence crystallized. In 1776, the Declaration of Independence announced a radical claim that all men are created equal and endowed with unalienable rights. Drafted primarily by Thomas Jefferson, the document was both a philosophical statement and a political act of defiance. It did not end the war, but it redefined its purpose. The colonies were no longer fighting for reform. They were fighting to become a nation. Victory was uncertain and costly. Soldiers endured brutal winters, scarce supplies, and constant danger. Civilians faced economic collapse, displacement, and internal division. Yet, support from foreign allies, particularly France, shifted the balance. The war culminated in 1781 with the British surrender at Yorktown. 2 years later, the Treaty of Paris formally recognized American independence. Freedom, however, was only the beginning. The newly independent states faced the daunting task of nation building. Leaders known as the Founding Fathers debated how to balance power, protect liberty, and prevent tyranny. The Articles of Confederation proved too weak, revealing the challenges of unity. In response, the Constitutional Convention of 1787 produced a new framework of government, one built on checks and balances, federalism, and the rule of law. The birth of the United States was not perfect. The ideals proclaimed in its founding documents clashed with the reality of slavery, exclusion, and inequality. Yet the revolution planted a powerful idea that government exists to serve the people, and that authority can be challenged when it fails to do so. This idea would echo far beyond American borders, inspiring movements for freedom around the world. When rebellion became an idea, it reshaped history. What began as resistance against imperial control became a bold experiment in self-rule. The American Revolution did more than create a nation. It introduced a promise that future generations would struggle to define, defend, and fulfill. By the middle of the 19th century, the United States stood at a crossroads. The nation born from ideals of liberty and equality was fractured by a contradiction it had never resolved. Slavery, embedded deeply in the country's economic and social systems, divided Americans along moral, political, and geographic lines. What had been postponed at the nation's founding could no longer be ignored. The question was no longer whether the Union would confront this injustice, but how much blood it would cost. The divide between North and South grew sharper with each passing decade. The industrial North, increasingly urban and diverse, began to see slavery as incompatible with democratic values. The agricultural South, whose economy depended heavily on enslaved labor, viewed any challenge to slavery as a threat to its survival and way of life. Compromises attempted to preserve balance. New states were admitted, laws rewritten, boundaries redrawn, but each solution merely delayed the inevitable. The nation was drifting toward conflict. In 1860, the election of Abraham Lincoln accelerated the crisis. Lincoln opposed the expansion of slavery, though he initially sought to preserve the Union above all else. To Southern leaders, his victory signaled a future where their power would diminish. One by one, Southern states seceded, forming the Confederate States of America. The Union was broken, and the American Civil War began in 1861 with the firing on Fort Sumter. The war that followed was unlike any the nation had known. Brother fought against brother, and communities were torn apart by loyalty and loss. Battles such as Antietam, Gettysburg, and Shiloh revealed the true cost of division. Soldiers endured unimaginable suffering, disease, hunger, and relentless violence. Civilians, too, paid a heavy price as cities burned, farms were destroyed, and families waited in fear for news that often arrived too late. At the heart of the conflict was slavery. What began as a war to preserve the Union gradually transformed into a struggle for human freedom. In 1863, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring enslaved people in Confederate states to be free. Though limited in immediate effect, it reshaped the moral purpose of the war. The fight was no longer only about national unity. It was about redefining the meaning of liberty itself. Enslaved African Americans played a critical role in this transformation. Thousands escaped plantations, sought refuge with Union forces, and eventually joined the fight. Black soldiers fighting for a freedom long denied to them proved their courage and determination on the battlefield. Their service challenged long-held assumptions and forced the nation to confront its own prejudices, even as equality remained far from achieved. Abraham Lincoln emerged as the war's defining figure. Burdened by loss and responsibility, he struggled to hold the nation together while navigating political pressure and moral uncertainty. His words, most famously in the Gettysburg Address, reframed the conflict as a test of whether a nation conceived in liberty could endure. Lincoln envisioned a country reborn through sacrifice, committed to a deeper and more inclusive understanding of freedom. The war ended in 1865 with the surrender of Confederate forces. The Union was preserved and slavery was abolished through the 13th Amendment. Yet victory came at a devastating cost. More than 600,000 lives were lost, and the nation was left scarred, grieving, and uncertain about its future. Reconstruction promised healing and justice, but it also revealed how difficult transformation could be. Lincoln did not live to see that future. His assassination just days after the war's end shocked the nation and deepened its sorrow. The man who had guided America through its darkest hour became a symbol of unity and unfinished work. His death underscored a painful truth. Ending slavery did not end division. The Civil War transformed the United States. It redefined the relationship between the federal government and the states, reshaped citizenship, and expanded the meaning of freedom. Yet the legacy of the war remained complex and unresolved. The nation had survived its greatest internal conflict, but the struggle to live up to its ideals would continue. A nation divided against itself had nearly fallen. Through sacrifice and suffering, it endured. And in that endurance, America was changed forever. Its story rewritten in blood, courage, and the enduring hope that freedom, once claimed, must be defended by every generation that follows. In the decades following the Civil War, the United States entered an era of rapid transformation. The nation, scarred but reunited, turned its energy toward growth and expansion. Steam engines roared, factories multiplied, and railroads stretched across the continent like steel veins. This was the Industrial Revolution in America, a time of unprecedented innovation and opportunity, but also of deep inequality and human cost. The American dream was taking shape, powerful and persuasive, yet unevenly distributed. Cities became the symbols of this new age. New York, Chicago, Pittsburgh, and countless others swelled with activity as people poured in from farms, small towns, and distant countries. Skyscrapers rose toward the sky, fueled by steel and ambition. Electricity illuminated streets that never seemed to sleep. For many, this city represented possibility, a place where hard work might lead to success. But beneath the bright lights lay crowded tenements, polluted air, and exhausting labor. Immigration transformed the nation's identity. Millions arrived from Europe, Asia, and beyond, fleeing poverty, persecution, and limited opportunity. They carried little more than hope and determination. At Ellis Island and other ports of entry, Newcomers were processed, inspected, and often separated from loved ones. For those who stayed, life was harsh. Immigrants worked the most dangerous jobs in factories, mines, and railroads, earning low wages for long hours. Still, many believed that sacrifice in one generation could mean opportunity for the next. Industry created immense wealth, but it concentrated power in the hands of a few. Industrialists like Andrew Carnegie, John D. Rockefeller, and J.P. Morgan built vast empires that reshaped the economy. Their success symbolized the promise of capitalism, yet it also highlighted its excesses. Workers labored under unsafe conditions with little protection or voice. Child labor was common and injuries were frequent. The gap between rich and poor widened, challenging the idea that effort alone determines success. Inequality sparked resistance. Labor unions formed as workers organized strikes and protests, demanding fair wages, reasonable hours, and safer workplaces. Events like the Haymarket Affair and the Pullman strike revealed the tension between labor and industry, often met with violence and government intervention. These struggles were not only economic, they were moral battles over dignity, rights, and the definition of fairness in a rapidly changing society. Women also entered the industrial workforce in large numbers, particularly in textile mills and factories. Though paid less than men, their labor became essential to family survival. At the same time, reformers began to challenge traditional roles and advocate for education, suffrage, and social change. The industrial age reshaped not only how Americans worked, but how they understood identity, gender, and possibility. The American dream evolved during this period. It became a promise that anyone, regardless of origin, could rise through hard work and determination. Stories of self-made success inspired millions, yet they often overlooked systemic barriers faced by immigrants, African Americans, and the poor. For many, the dream remained just out of reach, constrained by discrimination and limited opportunity. Still, belief in that dream fueled ambition and resilience. Despite hardship, communities formed. Ethnic neighborhoods preserved language, culture, and faith, creating support networks in unfamiliar cities. Schools, churches, and social organizations helped immigrants adapt while maintaining a sense of belonging. These communities became the foundation of modern American culture, blending traditions into a shared, evolving identity. By the early 20th century, the United States had emerged as an industrial powerhouse. Its cities stood as monuments of human ambition, innovation, and contradiction. The industrial era had expanded opportunity and deepened inequality, leaving a legacy both inspiring and troubling. The American dream survived, not as a guarantee, but as a powerful idea that continued to draw people forward. Industry and immigration reshaped the nation forever. In factories and crowded streets, amid struggle and hope, Americans redefined what it meant to belong, to strive, and to dream. And in that relentless pursuit, the modern United States began to take form. The early decades of the 20th century were a time of profound upheaval and transformation for the United States. The promise of industry and innovation collided with the harsh realities of economic instability and global conflict. Americans faced challenges that tested their resilience, reshaped their society, and ultimately propelled the nation onto the world stage. Through depression, war, and struggle, the United States emerged stronger, its identity forever altered. The 1920s, often remembered as the Roaring Twenties, brought prosperity and exuberance to many Americans. Cities pulsed with jazz, invention, and new technologies. Cars, radios, and skyscrapers transformed daily life. Yet, beneath the glittering surface, the economy was fragile. Speculation, uneven wealth distribution, and overextended credit left the nation vulnerable. In 1929, that vulnerability exploded into catastrophe. The stock market crashed and the Great Depression began, plunging millions into poverty, unemployment, and despair. Families across the nation faced unprecedented hardship. Bread lines and soup kitchens became symbols of survival, while entire communities struggled to maintain dignity amid widespread suffering. Farmers lost their land to foreclosure, banks failed, and industries collapsed. The American dream seemed distant, and hope was a scarce commodity. Yet adversity also fostered resilience. Neighbors helped neighbors, and Americans found strength in collective endurance. Art, literature, and music captured the pain and perseverance of the era, documenting a nation grappling with its own contradictions. The federal government responded with bold experimentation. Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal program sought to provide relief, recovery, and reform. Public works projects employed millions, bringing electricity, roads, and infrastructure to previously isolated regions. Social security, labor protections, and banking reforms reshaped the relationship between government and citizen. The Depression was a crucible, forcing the nation to redefine responsibility, fairness, and opportunity. As the United States slowly recovered, the world plunged into conflict. World War I had already tested the young nation, but the rise of totalitarian regimes in Europe and Asia soon demanded more decisive action. Initially hesitant to engage in global wars, Americans watched as fascism and militarism threatened democracy abroad. By the time Japan attacked Pearl Harbor in 1941, the country was ready to mobilize. The United States entered World War II with determination, innovation, and industrial might. War transformed every aspect of American life. Factories once focused on consumer goods now produced tanks, planes, and munitions at unprecedented speed. Women entered the workforce in large numbers, symbolized by Rosie the Riveter, while African Americans and other minority groups challenged segregation and discrimination as they fought for freedom overseas. Rationing, enlistment, and sacrifice became a shared experience, forging national unity and purpose. Americans endured loss, yet they also witnessed the extraordinary power of collective effort. Military campaigns spanned continents, from the beaches of Normandy to the islands of the Pacific, and from North Africa to the skies over Germany and Japan. Soldiers faced unimaginable danger, yet their courage, strategy, and perseverance proved decisive. Victory came at a high cost, but it cemented the United States' position as a global leader. The war demonstrated not only the nation's industrial and military capacity, but also its moral authority in defending democracy and human rights. Following the war, the United States entered a period of unprecedented influence and prosperity. Its economy dominated the globe. Its military presence extended across continents, and its culture, through music, film, and innovation, spread worldwide. America had transitioned from a fractured, domestic-focused society to a central actor on the world stage. Yet with power came responsibility, and the challenges of the Cold War, civil rights struggles, and social change loomed on the horizon. Through depression and war, the United States had been transformed. The trials of the Great Depression taught resilience and the importance of collective action. World War II proved the nation's ability to mobilize for justice, even at immense human cost. From these experiences emerged a society capable of leadership, innovation, and global engagement. A country no longer confined by its borders or its past, but shaped by its enduring ideals and ambitions. The story of this era is a testament to the power of perseverance. Adversity revealed both the limits and the possibilities of the American experiment. From economic collapse to total war, Americans endured, adapted, and triumphed. And in doing so, they forged a nation ready to embrace its role as a global power, ones whose influence would be felt for generations to come. By the mid-20th century, America had become a nation of contradictions. It proclaimed freedom, equality, and opportunity, yet vast segments of its population remained marginalized, oppressed, or ignored. The legacy of slavery, segregation, and gender inequality persisted, shaping the lives of millions who had yet to see the promises of the American dream fulfilled. In this era, courage took the form of voice, the refusal to remain silent in the face of injustice. From city streets to rural towns, ordinary people became extraordinary in their pursuit of equality, sparking a transformation that would define modern America. The civil rights movement emerged as the most visible and powerful expression of this struggle. African Americans, long subjected to systemic discrimination, segregation, and violence, demanded the rights that had been denied for generations. Leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and Malcolm X became symbols of determination, their words and actions inspiring millions. Grassroots activists organized boycotts, marches, and sit-ins, challenging both law and custom. The Montgomery bus boycott, the Freedom Rides, and the March on Washington were not just acts of protest. They were declarations of humanity, a refusal to accept the status quo. This movement was not only about political change, but also moral awakening. Images of peaceful demonstrators facing fire hoses, police dogs, and brutal arrests awakened the conscience of the nation. Television brought the struggle into living rooms across America, bridging distances and creating empathy. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 were victories hard-won, milestones in a continuing effort to align national ideals with national reality. Yet even as laws changed, the work of reshaping attitudes, institutions, and hearts continued. At the same time, women began asserting their voices more forcefully, challenging social and legal limitations. The feminist movement of the 1960s and 1970s sought to dismantle barriers in education, the workplace, and society at large. Icons like Betty Friedan, Gloria Steinem, and countless unnamed activists called for equality, reproductive rights, and recognition of women's contributions. Their efforts reshaped the expectations of what women could achieve, creating opportunities for future generations while exposing deep-seated cultural biases. Social justice movements expanded beyond race and gender, addressing inequality on multiple fronts. Native Americans fought for recognition and sovereignty. LGBTQ+ communities demanded acceptance and legal protection, and labor activists pressed for fair treatment and economic opportunity. Each movement contributed to a larger conversation about who belonged in the American story and what justice truly meant. Voices once silenced were finding platforms, forging connections, and inspiring change. Cultural shifts accompanied these political struggles. Literature, music, and film reflected the evolving values of a restless nation. Songs became anthems of protest and hope. Novels explored the pain and resilience of marginalized communities, and artists challenged perceptions through bold, innovative work. These expressions of culture amplified the movements, giving them rhythm, narrative, and emotional resonance. America was learning to hear not just the laws of the land, but the voices of its people. Resistance was met with obstacles, intimidation, and even violence. Activists faced arrests, harassment, and even death. Yet the refusal to remain silent proved contagious. Young people joined marches, communities organized sit-ins, and ordinary citizens risked everything to demand change. Courage became collective, and the act of speaking out was itself revolutionary. Every voice mattered, contributing to a chorus that no law, prejudice, or fear could fully suppress. By the end of the 20th century, the United States had transformed in significant ways. Legal segregation was abolished. Women had expanded opportunities in education and employment, and marginalized communities had gained greater visibility and influence. Yet the journey towards equality was and remains ongoing. The legacy of these movements is not only in the laws written or the milestones achieved, but in the understanding that freedom and justice are never final. They must be claimed, defended, and reimagined by each generation. Voices That Refused to Be Silent is a story of persistence, courage, and hope. It is a testament to the power of speaking truth to power, of insisting that humanity cannot be ignored, and that equality is not merely an aspiration, but a responsibility. From the streets of Birmingham to the boardrooms of modern America, these voices reshaped the nation, leaving a profound imprint on its identity, culture, and conscience. Through their courage, America was reminded that liberty is not given. It is demanded, defended, and continually renewed. In the 21st century, the United States stands at the intersection of history and possibility, a nation shaped by centuries of triumph, struggle, and transformation. From the earliest days of discovery to the Industrial Revolution, through wars and social upheavals, America has continuously evolved, carrying forward the legacies of courage, ambition, and dissent. Yet modern America is a place of complexity, a society balancing innovation with inequality, freedom with responsibility, and promise with ongoing challenges. Technology defines much of contemporary life. Digital networks, smartphones, artificial intelligence, and global connectivity have transformed how Americans work, communicate, and think. Cities pulse with constant innovation, and ideas now spread at the speed of light, reshaping commerce, culture, and education. Yet with opportunity comes disruption. Jobs change, privacy is threatened, and communities must adapt to rapid social and economic shifts. In this era, the nation's ingenuity is both its greatest asset and a source of profound tension. America's global role has expanded in scale and responsibility. As a world leader, the United States engages in diplomacy, trade, and security initiatives across continents. Military presence and economic influence intersect with moral and ethical dilemmas, compelling the nation to navigate complex alliances and conflicts. Global challenges such as climate change, pandemics, and cyber threats demand coordinated responses, testing the nation's capacity for leadership and vision. The America that once looked inward must now balance domestic priorities with global stewardship. Internally, the nation wrestles with questions of identity and unity. Diversity is a defining strength, yet cultural, racial, and political divisions remain deep. Immigration continues to shape the national fabric, enriching society with new traditions, languages, and perspectives. At the same time, debates over equity, justice, and representation challenge Americans to confront the unfinished work of their past. Civil discourse, civic engagement, and shared values are essential in bridging differences and shaping a future that reflects the principles of liberty and inclusion. The legacy of history is visible in both progress and tension. The gains of the civil rights movement, women's rights, and social justice campaigns have transformed society, yet disparities persist. Economic inequality, systemic bias, and regional disparities remind Americans that freedom and opportunity must be actively preserved. Every generation inherits both the victories and the unresolved challenges of its predecessors, creating a delicate balance between honoring the past and innovating for the future. Cultural influence continues to be a hallmark of America's identity. Music, film, literature, and digital media reach global audiences, shaping perceptions of freedom, creativity, and possibility. Stories of struggle and triumph, rooted in centuries of American experience, inspire new generations to imagine what the nation can become. Culture is both reflection and aspiration, reminding citizens that identity is constructed not only by policy, but by collective imagination, expression, and values. Yet America's path is not predetermined. The nation faces urgent questions about climate sustainability, technological ethics, healthcare access, education equity, and global cooperation. Civic engagement, innovation, and empathy will determine whether the United States meets these challenges or falters under their weight. History provides lessons of resilience, sacrifice, and vision, but it does not guarantee success. Each generation must decide how to apply wisdom, courage, and creativity to the problems of its time. Despite the challenges, hope remains central to the American story. The idea that individuals can shape their destiny, that communities can unite for progress, and that a nation can embody ideals greater than itself, continues to inspire. America today is a living experiment in democracy, diversity, and human potential. A country simultaneously defined by its past and oriented toward the future. America today, legacy, conflict, and the road ahead, is both a reflection and a challenge. It asks citizens to consider what has been achieved, what remains undone, and what must be imagined anew. From technological revolutions to social movements, from domestic debates to global responsibilities, the nation is called to act with foresight, courage, and a commitment to justice. Its identity is continually negotiated, its power continually tested, and its promise continually renewed. In the end, modern America is a story still being written. The echoes of centuries of discovery, rebellion, innovation, and struggle resonate in every corner of the nation. Its challenges are formidable, its potential extraordinary. To meet the road ahead, Americans must draw on the lessons of their history, embrace the diversity of their present, and imagine a future that is as inclusive, ambitious, and resilient as the ideals upon which the nation was founded. The journey continues, and with it, the enduring quest to align liberty, justice, and opportunity for all.